Sean, we're at the Stanley Cup Final. We're in the off-ice officials room. No one's here. We're here. This is a little taste of what the At the Rink podcast is, because you know what? We're at the rink.
We are at the rink, and we found a quiet place on the media day here on Wednesday. First day of availability in Edmonton after a long travel day for everybody on Tuesday, including the players. Although there was a lot of Mario Kart being played, I found out today, which is more fun than I had flying. I don't know about you, but we got Game 3 tomorrow, and it should be really interesting.
If the Panthers get here, they need to get here.
They'll get here.
They'll get here. They practiced at home today, Wednesday morning, but the weather in Fort Lauderdale has been atrocious, so they've been delayed, but they'll get here. They'll get here today, Wednesday, at some point, and they'll be ready to go for Game 3. Listen, I mean, they've been ready to go. We're just doing a check-in episode here for the At the Rink podcast. 2 games into the Stanley Cup Final. They've been the better team. They've earned their wins. They're up 2-0 in this series. Let me clarify that. They were not the better team in Game 1. Bobrovsky was the better goalie in Game 1, I think. That's my opinion. Game 2, I think Florida played exactly how it was, and I would expect the Panthers to continue with that game. So now the Oilers have to adjust being back home.
I think the Edmonton Oilers have won maybe 2 periods of this series. Maybe 2 periods. They're not the better team. They weren't the better team in Game 1 on a whole. You play to win the game. You don't play for artistic points. So, to me, Florida's played a near flawless game. You know, the most amazing thing to me is Edmonton had more chances in Game 1, but they still weren't super high quality. They had a couple of breakaways on breakdowns, and Bobrovsky bailed them out. But the way that they play defense against the Edmonton Oilers in their end, like Connor McDavid skates around like only Connor McDavid can skate around, but he never has a shooting lane. He skates around and holds the puck for 20 seconds and then tries to pass it to somebody, and they check off. It's like almost like a basketball defense. Like one guy takes him so far, and then another guy says, I got him, and then they do that, and then a third guy picks him up, and nobody can skate with him, but they have every area of the ice covered.
It's funny that you mentioned the basketball reference, because I would think back to the conference final when Florida was playing the New York Rangers. And Vincent Trocheck was asked a question about how it seems as though the Panthers are shading him and shading Artemi Panarin. And maybe that was a result of Alexis Lafreniere getting open a little bit more to score more, but it was like that was their style. It's a man-on-man defense, and they were shading to the better players, right? Trocheck said, I mean, a little bit, but this isn't basketball. It's a free-flowing. It's a little bit different. I agree with you. I think it is it's not basketball, but it's a little bit of that. The way the Panthers play defense, they are aggressive, but they're in your face, but they are sort of hanging on to the best guys and saying, all right, you're not going to beat us. We're going to force your other guys to beat you. And to me, right now, the Oilers' other guys, they're not good enough to beat the Panthers.
Well, you look at Edmonton's only goal. Everybody shaded Draisaitl, including Bobrovsky, and Mattias Ekholm scores. If you told anybody that we'd be going into Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final and Mattias Ekholm would own the only goal and it was on a 2-on-1, people would call you crazy.
It was a 4-on-4 goal too, right?
Yeah, they still haven't scored regular strength.
They haven't scored regular strength. They haven't scored a power play goal. And that's been a big topic, obviously, a conversation in this series. How do the Oilers generate more? Like, how do they get more offense? Let's look at their power play first, right? 0 for 7 in the series, 7 shots on goal. 6 shots in Game 1 on an 0 for 3. 0 for 4 with 1 shot on goal in Game 2. Total attempts, 23 at the net. Yes, in Game 2, Evan Bouchard hit the post, okay? Leon Draisaitl had a great look on his one-timer from below the right circle. Bobrovsky made a great save. And a couple of seconds after a power play expired, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins hit the post too, at the crossbar. So they had some looks. That was on one particular power play. You'd expect them to get some looks, but they're not generating enough looks. They say, yeah, we're okay with our looks. They can't be okay with their looks. They're not generating enough looks on their power play, and they're not shooting. They're passing too much. They're a seam passing team, and the Panthers are covering the seams.
You know what a post is?
Best friend.
Nothing.
Yeah. It's
It
a miss.
means that the goalie played, and that was all you had was the post. So, I've heard them say, a couple of posts. And Chris Knobloch came out and said, if we scored on our 3 goals that we hit the post on, it's a completely different narrative. Yeah, and if I was Rich,
Right.
I'd be sitting in the front row watching this series and not covering it as a writer. Although that's not true. I enjoy this so much, I'd still probably be covering it as a writer. But I might have flown in more comfort than I did here. They need to be better. They're trying to pass the puck into the net. Like, that's the sense I get. And maybe some of it's Bobrovsky being so good. The Edmonton Oilers with McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard from the point, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, the list goes on, had 7 shots through 2 periods of hockey. They had 10 shots in Game 6. They've lost some of their offensive mojo.
It's McDavid said something interesting today in his press conference, and I wrote about it too. When he said for their power play, he was talking in particular on their power play. He said because they're so aggressive, right? They're in your face. That's what meaning the Panthers penalty kill. That it's not going to be as structured of a power play. They're going to have to get out of the structure that they normally have on the power play. Hyman in the front of the net, right? I mean, Bouchard at the point, McDavid going circle to circle and around, Draisaitl below the right circle, Nugent-Hopkins on the other side. That's their structure, and it works. I mean, believe me, it works, right? But he said against this particular penalty kill, because they're so aggressive, they're there before the puck is there. Because they know the structure. He said, we need a bit of more of a road hockey mentality. It's got to be a little more freelance, right? A little more just get out of your structure, play a little road hockey on their power play. And normally that goes against the grain of what you would want. But I agree with him. Because if they can break their structure, if they can freelance and shoot the puck to create some chaos that way, it'll help. It'll generate. It's not the way that they always score on the power play, but their guys are so skilled that they can do something different and still find a way. And he said it. He goes, listen, our power play has been together for a long time. We've solved penalty kills before, and we'll solve this one. That might be the way they have to solve it.
I just keep thinking about, we had Ryan Callahan on last week, and he talked about the power play, and he talked about when it goes bad, right? In the playoffs, it's really hard to have a good power play because of the amount of video that you have, and really smart coaches who that's their whole job, is to negate a power play. It looks like, and Connor McDavid said it looks like at times that the Florida Panthers know what the Edmonton Oilers want to do with the puck before the Edmonton Oilers know what they want to do with the puck. And so you start to fail, and you start to grip your stick really hard. And look, the Edmonton power play was at, 30-something% coming into this?
37.3% in the first 3 rounds.
They don't have it anymore, and it bleeds into other parts of their game. Guys start to get nervous. Guys start to press. Sticks start to get gripped. It bleeds over into 5-on-5. It's a nightmare for them. If your team isn't a good power play team, it's a nightmare when you don't do well. We've seen a couple of teams with really bad power plays win. Boston was one of them, if I remember right. Edmonton has always counted on their power play, and it has deserted them at the worst time. And I don't know if it's deserted them or if the Florida Panthers have taken it away. With all that said, we haven't gotten to what might be the most important point in Game 3. Florida's done all of this because they have the best defensive player in hockey. After this series, after this playoffs, there should be no question about it. Barkov is the best 200 player in the game. But does he play in Game 3? That's the big question. Paul Maurice said today before they left Florida, as of this taping, they still haven't left Florida.
Right.
I don't know when the hard stuff's going to end in Florida for them to take off, but Paul Maurice said that he looked better. He practiced on Wednesday, and he's expected. They hope he'll play on Thursday, that he'll still be good when he gets off the plane. But I'll tell you, I've never seen Paul Maurice look so down after a win than he did after Game 2. He was not vivacious. He was not bubbly. He looked like he had lost his best friend. And today he said it. He said, we thought we lost our captain, and there's no way that I could put a brave face on it.
Well, no, he's 100% right. He's so valuable to them. They're a completely different team if he doesn't play. I expect him to play. We'll know more. I mean, by the time you listen to this podcast, you might have an understanding of, we might have something firm on Barkov's availability for Game 3. Because he practiced Wednesday, I expect him to be in the lineup, and I expect him to be himself in the lineup. But if you look at it, right, what ailed the Panthers last year? When they went this far, they were beat up, right? Well, put Barkov aside, they're pretty healthy, right? And if he's able to go, that would mean that he is healthy and ready to play. It's not the case with the Edmonton Oilers. Darnell Nurse is expected to play Game 3, but he's banged up. Evander Kane, I don't think should play Game 3 based on how he looks and how he's skating, and they haven't made a decision on that. Again, by the time you listen to this podcast, we might know. Corey Perrier is very likely to play Game 3, but it looks like the Oilers are starting to get beat up a little bit here, and maybe even, and a couple of colleagues of ours have been saying it too, that McDavid coming off the wall on the power play is not looking to shoot the way he normally does. Maybe he's dealing with something, just a little subtle thing that is preventing him from being confident in that shot. I don't know. That's just that's just throwing that out there, but. Yeah, like they're starting to get beat up a little bit too. That's what the Panthers do. And the Panthers are not going to stop doing it unless or until the Oilers start to break out offensively. They can generate chances all they want. If they don't score, the Panthers are not going to change anything that they're doing.
I like how you threw unnamed colleagues under the bus with the McDavid potential injury. No naming of names.
No, why would I name anybody?
No facts.
No facts.
Nothing.
Yeah.
I like it.
We're winging it here. We're in a off-ice officials room. There's a bathroom right there. We're winging this.
I like it a lot. Look, they're healthy, and if Darnell Nurse doesn't play, look, I know he's the whipping boy here in Edmonton for this playoffs. He's minus 12. He's been on the ice for some really bad plays. Him and Cody Ceci, who hasn't seen the ice since Game 1, doesn't look like he's going to play in Game 3. But when Nurse was out in Game 2, they rode Evan Bouchard, who's been fantastic. He can't handle the minutes they're giving him. In Game 2, he was at like 26 minutes when the Rodriguez play happened. And for those of you who don't remember, Rodriguez, who admitted he was in trouble with what he was trying to do, tried to feed the puck into the middle and turned it over to Evan Bouchard, which could have sprang the Oilers going the other way with Florida out of position. Evan Bouchard gave the puck right back to Evan Rodriguez, who then put it right under the bar and turned the whole tide of that game. It was an egregious turnover, and it was one that I think was made from overuse.
And that's the difference. I think a huge difference, and we talked about it throughout the season and heading into this series. Depth. The Panthers are deep. The Oilers have already scratched one of their second pair defensemen in this series, and he's likely going to be scratched again. I'm talking about Cody Ceci. The second pair for the Florida Panthers is Nico Mikkola and Brandon Montour, who are as steady and solid of a second pair. The first pair of Aaron Ekblad and Gustav Forsling might be the best pair in hockey right now, right? And the third pair, you debate Oliver Ekman-Larsson's Game 2 all you want. I don't think he can play better, whatever. He's a third pair defenseman with Dmitry Kulikov, and they were fine. They were good enough, right? Did not hurt them in any way. And that's what you want from your third pair, okay? You don't have to go win us the game, but don't hurt us, right? Don't blow it for us either. And they didn't. There's no questions about the lineup unless we're talking about Barkov and his availability, which is a huge question, but I think partially was answered today at practice. And there are more questions daily about the Oilers lineup. In fact, after Game 1, I was a little bit surprised, Sean. Like, after Game 1, which I thought Edmonton played pretty well, they just didn't score. Bobrovsky had to be great. They made a couple of changes. I was like, all right. I mean, the CC, okay, he struggled. You want to make that change? Okay. And they made made the forward change too, took Corey Perry out. I was wondering, like, is that an overreaction to a 3-0 loss? That really, I mean, it was a 3-0 loss, but they were pretty good in that game. And then they look at game 2 and Knobloch, who'd made great decisions all playoffs, like that, those decisions in game 2 didn't obviously pay off at all. So I'm wondering, now you go into game 3, there's more lineup questions. There's very little question about the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, well, I think game 1 and game 2 were completely different games, right? Game 1 was a speed game for the most part. There was some physicality, but it wasn't in any way mean or nasty. And that's Corey Perry's game at this point. So I think they looked at it and they said, we need to get a little speed in. And so they brought in other guys. And one of their speed guys made a huge mistake in the first period of that game, the 5-minute major for kneeing and the game misconduct. And it put Edmonton on their heels. Not only were they shorthanded, they had to kill a penalty. They ended up scoring on the 4-on-4 that happened in the middle of that, and that was the only highlight for them. But it really got their rotation out of the way, and then that game turned mean. Game 2 was a mean, nasty Stanley Cup final game. A lot of players reveled in it. Yeah. I think Corey Perry is one of those players. I think the biggest thing, look, if Barkov plays, I think the biggest thing that happened from the Draisaitl hit on Barkov is it woke Matthew Tkachuk up. He was good in the first 2 games, but he wasn't Matthew Tkachuk. He wasn't the guy who was running around and causing all kinds of chaos. And good for him because he's learned, but then you saw in the third period of that game, he was a little bit more of that player. The Panthers were angry. They see their captain go down on what they think is a questionable hit. It was a penalized hit. It was up high. And they got angry, and they wanted their pound of flesh. And I just remember the breakaway that McDavid had late in the game with Tkachuk chasing him all the way down the ice. And when it was finished, he rode him right into the backboard, and he kept trying to mess with him. And the linesman knew right away, and he was trying to pull him apart. And Tkachuk wasn't giving him any space, and he was running his mouth. And I really thought that stirred up the hornet's nest for Florida.
Well, something's got to stir up for Edmonton now because Draisaitl's got to be better than he's been. McDavid, I think, has been pretty good, just hasn't put the puck in the net or hasn't generated much. But they, in general, just have to generate more. And it's back to needing your best players to be your best players, right? And like I said, the Oilers aren't deep enough to rely on their third and fourth line guys to win them a hockey game. Can it be done? Sure, it can be done, but they can't rely on it in that way. And I got to tell you, you mentioned the Ekholm goal, right? And this was another thing. Bob Woods, an assistant coach, former NHL, longtime NHL assistant coach, does the coach's room for us. It's a great column, and he wrote about this. The way that the Oilers need to generate some offense is that goal is in particular is a good example of how they need to generate some offense 5-on-5. And this is what I'm going to be looking for the rest of this series. Can they do this? And even Matthias Ekholm talked about it today. The pressure that the Florida Panthers apply is great. I mean, they come down, like Aaron Ekblad on that goal is coming deep down the wall in the offensive zone. And the Oilers make a play to get the puck out, and it turns into an odd man rush because of that pressure. They're going to keep doing that pressure, but you can get them to back off if you start making the plays and you convert on some of these odd man rushes. They didn't convert on them in game 1, so they didn't back off, right? And I think that's one of the things, and Ekholm talked about it today. He said when you play against this team, you have to expect the pressure. But if you expect the pressure, you might be able to make a play that creates an outnumbered rush the other way. And McDavid mentioned it too, that there are chances. You can get chances when they're playing this aggressive. They don't happen often. That's the thing. You might only get 2 or 3 a game, 3 or 4 a game, and you've got to bury them. And if the Oilers don't bury them, the Panthers aren't going to change the way they play at all. And I've said that, and I'll hold to it. Like, they're going to look at it and say, hey, our goalie bailed us out. We're going to keep going this way.
I thought it was interesting. McDavid said today, when you play the Panthers, nothing happens for long stretches of time. The puck is stuck in the neutral zone, maybe 10 feet inside of each blue line, and it's being banged around and whatever. And then all of a sudden something pops, and you've almost been lulled into not having the opportunity, and to transition into being opportunistic is difficult. And it's something that Edmonton has struggled with. And that's what Connor McDavid said, is when we're presented with those opportunities, we need to do something with them. Look, the Florida Panthers have not been behind in this series, other than for
Couple of minutes in game.
8 minutes
Yeah.
in game one.
Game two.
Game two.
Yeah.
And so they haven't had to play desperate. They haven't been asked to break out of their comfort zone. The Edmonton Oilers have, and they haven't really been able to do it yet. But what happens when you punch at Florida in the mouth? And I think that's what, and not literally, because we know what happens when you punch Florida in the mouth. Literally, they're going to punch you harder. But I think figuratively, if you punch them in the mouth here at home with what should be a rabid crowd, I'm a little sad that it's not 1-1, and then the crowd here would be bazonkers. It's still going to be crazy, but look, it's 2-0. It's a hard thing to be confident and to be optimistic. I think you need to win a game before that happens. But they're going to play off their crowd. I don't think it's going to intimidate a Florida team that's 6-2 and has gone through some pretty tough buildings.
Yeah.
In Tampa, in Boston, in New York. They're not going to be fazed by what happens here in Edmonton. But if you can punch them in the mouth and stagger them and make them doubt themselves, then what happens?
Yeah.
But you got to do it, and they haven't done it yet.
They haven't been able to do it yet. They have another opportunity Thursday night. So that was a little check-in from the Stanley Cup Final. There's a few other things going on, Sean, in the hockey world. Cap Friendly's gone. Cap Friendly's going to be gone. The Washington Capitals are purchasing Cap Friendly, the website that everybody goes to look at salary cap information. It's a terrific website. I'm on it daily. And it's now leaving us because the Washington Capitals are buying it. It's a tool for them. I think it's an interesting purchase that the Capitals are an interesting investment, and it's sort of, I don't know if it corners any type of market for them, but there's resources there that the Cap Friendly guys have created that the Capitals are now going to use. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Washington buying this website?
Well, I think it's more for the talent, right? You said that they've created some stuff. Their ability to be leaders in that space, I think, is invaluable, right? So to onboard those developers onto their payroll, I'm sure that had to be part of it. There's got to be a non-compete. And look, I think that's the way things have been going for years. There's a lot of teams internally that have their own. There's some teams, I think, that don't, and they're going to be in a little bit of trouble going forward until they can figure it out. For the teams, it's all public domain. It's not like they're getting exclusive data, although I do think some of the cap-friendly data, the way that it's being collected is exclusive in the way that it's being used throughout the site. The raw data is there for anybody who wants it on the club site level, on the club level. So, it's just the way that you parse it and what you do with it. It's unfortunate for fans. There's other sites that are going to fill its place. But this isn't the first website that's been taken over by a team once they saw a value in it. And I think that's the idea of it, right? And I think what comes next is going to be better because people know that there's value in it. Why do you create things?
To create value.
To make money.
To make money.
Right? And you invest in it. And that's what the people at Cap Friendly did. Because everybody was always like, why would they do this website? Like, the work that goes into it, where's the money? Where's the payoff? They're not making enough money in ads. Like, where's the money? It's the same thing as The Athletic. Mm-hmm. The money was made in developing a subscription base, in developing data, in developing all these things. And it became a fungible asset, as they say in the venture capital world, a fungible asset. And that's what Cap Friendly was. And finally they got the price that they wanted, and good for them.
And it's great for them. It's great for those guys that developed it. I think it can be great for the Washington Capitals. It's a resource. It's another resource that they're investing in. Not surprising that Ted Leonsis is investing in a couple of, a tech type resource, right? Something that came out through tech that's been a big thing for him for his entire career, going back to the AOL days and all that stuff. So I'm going to miss the website. Somebody else is going to create something. I'd still think with the cap world that we're in right now in the NHL that it all should be readily available to fans. Forget just media, to fans and everything. But teams don't want it that way because it can be looked at as proprietary information. And so I also understand that. But I'm going to miss Cap Friendly, Sean.
Yeah, and look, I think a big part of the reason that it was bought is to deny
others.
Yes. Right? Now you have, if another team doesn't have the same level of tech as you do and you want to make a trade,
Right.
or you want to sign a free agent, you're in the driver's seat because you have information that they don't. And information is power. And look, I understand the clamoring for, openness in a cap world and everything else, but the teams want what they want. And this is all competition. It's not about what's best for everybody. It's about what's best for each team because they're looking to make an even playing field somewhat uneven.
Yeah.
The margins, it's what we talk about all the time. The margins, they're so fine. This is one of them.
This is one. This gives them an upper hand. No question about it. A couple other pieces of news. A couple of former NHL head coaches have been hired as assistant coaches. So here's a question. David Quinn hired to be an assistant with Mike Sullivan, with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Brad Larson hired to be an assistant with Ryan Huska and the Calgary Flames. So I have a question for you, Sean. You ready for this?
I'm always ready.
I don't know if you want to answer this.
You've never stumped me once.
I'm not going to stump you now either. Is David Quinn going to be the head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins before next season is done?
First thing I thought when I saw that release is that they've put somebody in place.
Yep.
For what might happen, but I don't think so. I think that they're going to work really well together, and I think David Quinn is going to rejuvenate Mike Sullivan a little bit, and I think they're going to be good early in the year, and things are going to smooth over there, and they're going to continue to work together.
Well, those two guys have a long history. They've been close friends for years. A lot of people confuse the two of them. People think that David Quinn is Mike Sullivan and Mike Sullivan's David Quinn. They're not. Okay, but they're both BU guys. They have a long-standing relationship, a great history together. So I'm not surprised. It was an opportunity. I mean, that was what I don't know if we brought it up here on this podcast a couple weeks ago, but I know I had mentioned it to some people that, like, if David Quinn's got to go take an assistant job, he's not going to be an NHL head coach again this coming season or next season, right? He's got to be an assistant. And what better place to go be an assistant than with Mike Sullivan when the Pittsburgh Penguins, because their opportunity might be there to be a head coach eventually if they look to make a change if the season goes off the rails a little bit next year. I agree with you, though. I don't think it will. I think Sullivan's too good of a coach. And I think they'll work well together. But this, I think, will help David Quinn. He's going to be on the bench in an NHL environment that's not a rebuilding environment. There's true NHL talent on this team. There's a goal of making the playoffs, of milking the last best years of an elite core. This is different from what David Quinn has experienced in the NHL. He took over the Rangers as a head coach in a rebuilding model. He left there, took over the San Jose Sharks, and was stripped of every resource he had, basically, and then shown the door. They still don't have a coach, by the way. So I think, by the way, Jeremy Colleton also got a job at the New Jersey Devils. That's another former NHL coach as an assistant. But I think this is exactly what David Quinn needs.
I agree 100%. I think, he's a much better coach than he's been given credit for. I don't think he got enough credit in New York. I don't think the Rangers are where they are now if they didn't have David Quinn to help develop a lot of their young players that ended up stepping up and being a big part of what this year was. And I don't think he ever got the credit. I thought he was, he was blamed excessively for what were necessary growing pains and then never, ever got a fair shake in San Jose. And look, coaches are desperate to coach. It's what they do. And it wasn't the ideal job, but it was one of 32, and he took it. And one of the reasons why you're coaching the NHL is because you have undying confidence in yourself. That's your superpower. Me or you might be like, oh my God, that's a really bad situation to walk into. I don't know who can fix it. The head coach who takes that job knows who can fix it, and it's him.
You're right about the New York thing with David Quinn, too. You think about what happened during his tenure there. He oversaw the end of Henrik Lundqvist and the start of Igor Shesterkin. He worked through that. He developed, Adam Fox developed under him. Keandre Miller started to develop under him. Panarin, they signed him. He incorporated Panarin in. He gave tough love to Alexis Lafreniere as a rookie. Wasn't handing him anything. Same thing with Capo Caco. This was not an easy job, and he had to handle a lot of things in New York. And they're 2 coaches removed. He's now, then they went to Gallant, now they went to Laviolette. Still haven't won the Stanley Cup, right? Still haven't gotten to the Stanley Cup final. But I think some of what David Quinn did there in New York, the Rangers are seeing some of the fruits of that now.
All I can think, Dan, while we sit here, we can do a little revisionist history, is what if David Quinn had gotten his hands on Matt Rempe?
Oh. You know who had his hands on Matt Rempe? Chris Knobloch. Coached him this year in Hartford. And Rempe loved the guy.
Yeah. And you know what I was thinking today? There's a beautiful setup here, by the way, at the Stanley Cup final here in Edmonton, where the media is set up in the practice rink. There's plenty of room. The podium's there. It's a beautiful setup. It's a major league setup. It looks like a Super Bowl media day or an NBA media day. Edmonton's done a fantastic job. And Chris Knobloch's up there today, and he's holding court in front of 50, 75 media members, whatever it might be. It's a long way from Hartford.
Oh, yeah.
As somebody who's gone to that Hartford rink a lot as a fan and as a reporter, it's a long way from Hartford. It's a long way to the top, then, when you want to rock and roll. And for Chris to make that trip this year, to be at this point, to me, is mind-boggling. And it should be the motivation for every coach in the American Hockey League. It is possible for it to happen.
What's the one thing that, other than coaching in the NHL, that Chris Knobloch and Paul Maurice have in common? They both coached in Hartford.
Different leagues.
Different leagues, but they both coached in Hartford, right? They both did. So, listen, I mean, there's a lot going on around the league. The Draft Class podcast, got to listen to that. The draft is coming up in just 2 weeks. Are we now? 2 weeks from the draft, I think, about that. 15 days, 16 days. Yeah.
They just spent the whole week in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Mike Morial and Adam Kimmelman at the Combine, and they killed it. Absolutely killed it. GMs and players, prospects. They got all the top prospects in their room, did a podcast, puts ours to shame, Dan. I'll say it right here, puts ours to shame, at least this episode.
Sure.
And if you want to know what's going to happen in the draft, listen to those two. Follow those two on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Mike Morial and Adam Kimmelman do a fantastic job. They have carved out a space that nobody else inhabits in quite the way they do.
Yeah. Last thing, too, Jim Nill, GM of the year. Not surprising. I'm not surprised that Jim Nill wins that again. He's done a terrific job. He's the exact, I remember back in December, I sat down with George McPhee at the Board of Governors meeting in Seattle. Nick Kotsanika and I both sat down with George. And he's now the president, obviously, of the Vegas Golden Knights. And he said, I don't understand why in our league there is a philosophy of we have to strip it down in order to build it back up. He said it shouldn't have to be that way. Now he's taking over an expansion team where he was given very favorable rules in an expansion draft. And he's got an owner with deep pockets that wants to spend and wants to win. So there's that. That's where his perspective matters in the comment, right? But Jim Nill is the perfect example that I think of when I think of what George McPhee said to us on that day in December. He didn't have to strip it down. There was no stripping down. They drafted well. They developed well. He built a young core and a veteran core that mixes together. And they were very close to being a Dallas, Florida Stanley Cup final. Edmonton earned it. No question about it. But the management job that Jim Nill has done now for years in Dallas is tops in the league.
I agree, and I don't. I think they've done a wonderful job. They overdeveloped their young talent in Texas. They have the great relationship there. They're able to move players back and forth. And you look at all their young guys, that contributed this year who weren't high draft picks because they've been good. They've never been bad, but you have, Harley and Wyatt Johnson and all of those guys. And that's been great in some signings. But the GM here in Florida.
Well, we're in Edmonton.
Yeah.
I know what you meant.
Here. It's tough to say anybody's had a better year than him. Look at the Rodriguez signing, right? Gustav Forsling off of waivers. I know it was earlier, and then signing him to a big contract when everybody thought it was crazy. It's unbelievable what's happened here and the way that they've brought people up and what they've done, I just can't fathom it.
They've done a great job. They're here. Dallas is not, so I don't think I can debate you on that topic right there. Although I do believe that Jim Nill is a GM of the Year winner and a respectable and a good choice.
I don't want to take anything away from Jim Nill. He's a
yeah.
fine choice. Any of the three would have been a fine choice. Patrick Alvin would have been a fine choice. I can also name 5 other ones.
Yeah.
Kenny Holland. Yeah. What Kenny Holland has done here with an Edmonton team that everybody thought had been mismanaged and was being driven into the ditch, for him to pull that out is unbelievable. So there's countless men who could have been the GM. My personal opinion, and I didn't have a vote, but my personal opinion, it would have been Bill Zito this year.
All right. Well, the rest of the awards are going to be at the award show in Las Vegas 15 days from now, June 27th. The draft is the 28th at Sphere in Las Vegas and the 29th as well. But we've still got a lot of Stanley Cup final left, Sean. I still don't think this is going to be a sweep. I'll tell you that right now. It's not going to be a sweep.
We're going back to Fort Lauderdale.
Definitely going back to Fort Lauderdale. I wouldn't be surprised if we're back here doing a podcast next week from this very room, the Off-Ice officials room. Somebody just walked in here. I think they want to get in here to do something. I don't know what. So let's get out of here. This was fun, Sean. Little catch-up episode, the Stanley Cup final. Enjoy the hockey.